April 19th, our new deadline for universal vaccine eligibility. 60 Minutes under fire for a controversial piece. And Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's first Netflix deal. Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Wednesday, April 7th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
Happy Wednesday, Jill. What a beautiful, nice week we're having here in New York. Yesterday is what we call opening day in New York City. The guys will know what I'm talking about.
What does that even mean? Is this some what do I dare I even ask that you're opening this with like some crazy sexist thing that you guys have been doing?
It's not
for
sexist years? At all. No, not at all. Let's just keep going before I get in trouble, though.
Okay. All right. Here we go. All adults in the U.S. should now be eligible for vaccination no later than April 19th, President Biden said, shaving 2 weeks off of his earlier deadline, as more states are already meeting that timetable. California says it's going to fully reopen its economy on June 15th with a couple of caveats. They're going to keep the statewide mask mandate in place for the time being. And the reopening is assuming that there is enough vaccine for whoever wants it and hospitalizations remain stable. Dr. Fauci says he thinks vaccination uptake is going to keep the U.S. from a fourth wave, but urging people to keep mitigation efforts in place.
I think the current state of the pandemic is basically like cases and hospitalizations are on the rise, deaths are on the decline, vaccinations are accelerating, variants are also accelerating. It's this very kind of like counterintuitive state that we're in right now. But interestingly, half of new cases are in just 5 states: New York, Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So we're not getting that like full-on wave that we had earlier this year. Also, this interesting new Gallup survey I saw yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, 35% of Americans are worried about catching COVID. That's down from 49%. 77% say that the situation is improving. That's up from 60%. And 64% of people report a fair amount of disruption to our lives, down from 70%. So just all told, you're clearly seeing that the public opinion is starting to move a little bit. People are starting to feel a little better about where we are, which is a good sign. And the other thing, Jill, just before we move on, I was just looking at this because I was curious about the Olympics. Japan has vaccinated less than 1% of their population. I mean, they're putting on a summer Olympics in like 2 or 3 months. I seriously don't know how that's going to happen.
But there are no fans, though, right? So it's just really the athletes, I guess, and their coaches. I mean, there's so many athletes, but
I guess, yeah.
You're not going to see this flood of tourists.
It just seems like, talk about a super spreader event in the making, just like all of the parties and the Olympic Village and all that. I don't know. It really seems wild that they're going to do it.
I want to know the 36% of people who've said there's not a fair amount of disruption to their lives. Like, how is that even possible? I don't even remember what my life was like before COVID.
I know, right? Yeah. I don't know. Who are those folks, right? Right into us. Tell us.
Okay. Switching gears, an update on a story that we touched upon on Monday. CBS News and 60 Minutes are facing a ton of backlash over that story from last weekend that focused on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the state's vaccine partnership with the grocery store chain Publix. The piece suggested that there may have been a pay-to-play situation between the governor's office and Publix, given that the company had made a donation to DeSantis' re-election campaign. And then played a role in distributing the vaccine. But several Florida officials, including Democrats, say Publix was recommended as a partner to the governor because it was ready to start vaccinating immediately, and that this had nothing to do with politics or this donation.
So CBS is standing by this story for what it's worth. They're basically saying that they tried to interview these folks that have now come out in sort of DeSantis's column, saying that they tried to interview them at the time. They wouldn't speak to them. It does seem like maybe this should not have passed their famously tough standards department. You know, I asked my friend in Miami just about this, and his take was that this controversy never made any sense to him because Publix is like who you want to be handling vaccines in Florida. It's like a huge part of daily life there. It's a chain of stores that people love, and it's just like, it's a good. I'm trying to think of like if there's an analogous company in New York. I was going to say like Dwayne Reed, but the difference is Dwayne Reed here is terrible. Nobody likes it. So I don't actually know.
I was going to say Fairway, but I think Fairway didn't they close up? Like I know.
I don't even know if they're around anymore. Maybe like Trader Joe's. I don't even know about them. But anyway, so I thought he made a pretty interesting point there, just about how much Floridians really trust Publix to begin with. By the way, what this really is, this is fantastic for Ron DeSantis, who is almost certainly, at least in my prediction, going to be the early choice for Republican nominee for president in 2024.
So I thought something seemed off about this story, actually, when we mentioned it on Monday. Admittedly, I hadn't seen it yet, and then on Monday I went and I watched it twice. 60 Minutes is making a pretty big accusation here, or at least an insinuation, that there was this pay-to-play scheme, as we mentioned, between Publix and the governor. But it really does not seem like that's the case. The governor even saying CVS and Walgreens, they got the vaccine first. They were the first retailers to distribute it. Hospitals also had the vaccine. Then the state set up drive-through locations. And by January, the governor saying they just needed to expand. So he met with local officials, and they thought Publix would be the best next partner. They did it on a trial basis. The governor says he even went to some of those locations on the first weekend, and everybody that he spoke to thought it went really smoothly. Most of that info cut from the 60 Minutes segment. The argument that Publix not the best venue for some minority communities, that was another big point of this piece. Basically that these minority communities, many don't have a Publix nearby, people don't have cars, so it would be challenging to go there. That is a challenge. Reaching some of those communities is a challenge in every single state. That's why New York, for example, you're starting to see these roving vaccine units, pop-up vaccination sites in certain communities with no appointments required. So this is not a problem that's exclusive to Florida. And I know this is kind of inside baseball, and I'm not really sure if anyone in the media, if you're not in the media, I don't know if you totally care. But as you say, it does matter. 60 Minutes is the gold standard of news. It's a weekly news magazine show. They're known for retaping interviews, taking as much time as they need to make sure that the story is right. That way there's no rush, there's no crazy deadline pressure. And this very much feels, at least to me, and I haven't seen anything that has proven me otherwise, that they had this hypothesis and then went out to prove it, as opposed to letting the story and the facts of the story tell it, right? Like,
that's
you go out. I used to be a reporter, and every single day I went out and I covered a story. And you thought you knew what you were going to get, right? Like you'd have a meeting in the morning with your team, and they'd be like, "Get me the soundbite that says this, this, and this." And then you go out, and sometimes it's what you think it is, but other times it's not. And you just have to let the story tell itself and just be true to that. It just, again, fostering distrust in the mainstream media. Adding to this narrative of a liberal media, and not surprising, Ron DeSantis himself making that argument. He said, in quote, "Unless you are a partisan leftist, do not trust corporate media. You can't trust them. They are not trustworthy. They will lie. They will smear." And then they just move to the next target, and they think they're going to get away with that. And you know what? Unfortunately, that message resonates. I still trust 60 Minutes. I'm still, even though this piece was, I think maybe a little problematic, I still think it's one of the best news shows out there. But I don't know. I think it's a problem.
Well, DeSantis will dine out on this for the next 10 years at least, probably. So, yeah, they did him a favor.
Meanwhile, Arkansas lawmakers overriding the governor of that state to make the state the first in the country to ban gender-confirming treatment or therapy or surgery for transgender minors. The governor, Asa Hutchinson, a Republican, he had said the legislature went a step too far in enacting the ban, especially because it doesn't grandfather in young people currently who are under hormone treatment, which is why he originally vetoed it.
I thought this quote from Hutchinson was pretty good. He said, quote, "The Republican Party that I grew up with believed in a restrained government that did not jump in the middle of every issue," end quote. I thought that sort of sums this up. It's just all cultural war stuff now. There's really like no such thing as old school conservatism anymore, at least in like Republican, like state level or like national level Republican politics. And this is just a perfect example. Like back in the day, this would have been a classic example of Republican overreach, even like getting involved in this
government
sort of
overreach,
thing.
you mean? Like
Government,
the
yes,
whole
yes,
point
yes.
of the Republican Party in
Right,
many ways
exactly.
was like small government. Don't
Yes,
get
exactly.
involved with this stuff.
Right.
A quick update on a really important story. The U.S. and Iran agreed through European intermediaries to begin the process of getting both countries back into compliance with the nuclear deal. A small first step toward reviving the agreement.
Yeah, so this was happening in Vienna. In Austria, Tehran basically wants the U.S. to lift sanctions first. Those sanctions have just crippled the Iranian economy. Washington insisting that the Iranians comply with the original terms of the deal before they lift sanctions. That's sort of the big sticking point. It's a little bit ridiculous because it was the United States that burned Iran by reneging on this deal. But both sides are calling that first day of talks constructive. So we may actually we may make some progress here in getting them back into compliance.
The U.S. economy getting ready to take off like a rocket ship. The IMF is predicting that America is set to lead the world in a post-COVID boom, estimating that the U.S. economy will grow 6.4% in 2021, the fastest rate in decades. That is nearly double the rate that it was predicting just 6 months ago. The global economy is expected to grow by 6%.
Huge numbers. I mean, it doesn't sound like it, right? But when you're talking about like GDP growth, those are just massive, like hit the ball out of the park numbers. The IMF crediting the rapid vaccine rollout in the U.S. for this new forecast, saying the end of the pandemic is, quote, increasingly visible. So, economists are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here. Q2 GDP going to be absolutely on fire. Q3 may be even better.
We didn't mention it because it came out on Friday, but the jobs report for the month of March was kind of like this blockbuster report, 912,000 new jobs created. Look, we're still way off where we were pre-pandemic, though.
Sure.
We're talking about like 12 million people who still are out of work in this pandemic. So it is a long way to go here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last year, terrible for just about everybody, with the exception, though, of the world's very, very rich. According to the Forbes annual billionaires list, Jeff Bezos is once again in the top spot, followed by Elon Musk, who is the biggest gainer thanks to Tesla's soaring share price, Bernard Arnault of LVMH, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg, rounding out the top five.
A couple other notable entries. Kim Kardashian making the list for the very first time. She is now officially a billionaire. Donald Trump dropped 300 spots. And get this, Mackenzie Scott, who is the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, she gave away $6 billion in 2020. And she ended up richer than she was before.
Wow.
Think about that just for a second. She literally could not give away her money fast enough. I mean, just think about the system we have in this country that makes that possible, for one thing. But look, despite, or really more likely because of the pandemic, there was this $5 trillion surge in wealth, a record number of new billionaires added to this list. I mean, Jill, books are going to be written about this phenomenon of people of this sort of, I mean, the K-shape, right? The vast majority of people suffering and these very few just sort of making off like bandits because of how the world changed in that last year and how they were, how they were set up to prosper from that.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's production company has announced its first docu-series for Netflix. It's called Heart of Invictus, and it's going to follow wounded veterans training for the 2020 Invictus Games. Harry will be the executive producer. He's also going to appear on camera for the series, which is the first to be produced under the couple's Archewell Productions umbrella as part of this big deal with Netflix.
I was in these guys' corner after the Oprah interview. But I'm really back. I vacillate on the Royals so much. I'm really back to being over them entirely. There's just something very crass about this racket that they're running. It's like they divorced themselves from their family to make like Netflix documentaries and Spotify podcasts. I don't know. Like, there's just something that rubs me a little bit the wrong way about that. I get it. I understand. They were basically run out of town by the paparazzi, and I understand they need to protect their family and they need to make money. And like, what else are they going to do, right? Like, they're not, they're celebrities. So I get it. I just don't like it.
I was so excited to hear your take on this. I'm with you. I guess part of us, it's like we're bitter because it's kind of our field. So it's like,
yeah, maybe that.
I think that's part. I know I have that, and it's real.
Sure.
Like if Meghan Markle ends up hosting the Today Show, we've got some problems.
Oh God.
No, but I think it's, look, by the way, I think that the proof will be in the pudding here. If this is a great documentary, and, if this is, it sounds like it has the making of it, and obviously we know the Invictus Games near and dear to Harry's heart. So this does make sense for them, and I'll watch.
Yeah, I'll probably watch too. You're right. It's not like he's doing some like completely random like true crime series, I guess. So that's.
He has a show. It's called Race to the Cure. Do you know anything about it?
Right.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, that is a show that Carlo is a producer on here at Cheddar.
Yes. Harry, watch your back, Harry, man. I don't like that.
And finally, Will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas is launching a $300 face mask that comes with noise-canceling headphones. Honeywell, the maker of N95 masks, partnering with him on the Zuper mask. So this includes filters as well as Bluetooth connectivity and LED lights. It is a bet that masks can become a fashion statement in the streetwear scene. Have you seen what this looks like, Carlo?
I have. Have you?
I'm Googling it right now.
Okay, I'll wait because it's worth your time.
Oh, I don't know about this.
I don't know.
It looks like it's like a hazmat mask or something.
Yeah. It looks like it's sort of like the Bane mask from Batman. First of all, I mean, just awesome timing, Mr. I Am, if that is your real name. But second of all, I mean, you might as well wear just a sign on your face that says like "Rob me," right? I mean, I don't know. Jill, I'm getting to the age now, I think, where I just don't really understand fashion, and like I'm just too old, and which is really kind of depressing because I feel like I used to be fairly stylish in my younger days. But I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but like I look at the teenagers out here in Brooklyn, and I'm just like, what are you guys doing? They're wearing what we wore 20 years ago. It's amazing how it just cycles back, right? Have you noticed this?
Well, so Peloton just did a collaboration with Adidas on a new line of kind of like workout clothes and sweats, and I don't understand it because it's all like really baggy. And
yeah,
I said to a friend of mine who's a producer at Cheddar, and I'm like, what do you think of the collaboration? I was so psyched about it. I was going to like buy, I was excited to get a few pieces. And I'm like, I don't think I can wear this. And he's like, it's Gen Z. It's too young. We don't get it. He's like, it's all too baggy. We don't. So I'm with you. I don't understand fashion right now either.
I mean, I look at pictures of myself from when I was a teenager, and I'm just like, what was I doing? Like, super baggy pants, really long T-shirts. But hey, you know what? Like, hey, you do you. Like, whatever works.
There's a really funny comedy bit that says that you could tell, especially for men, when they were married, because basically their fashion just stayed the same. Like, whatever year you were married, you're still wearing that style. I actually would say that it's more whatever year you have kids. Like, that's the stuff. At least for me, I stopped buying any new clothing for myself as soon as my daughter was born. It's like I don't have the time. So I will forever be.
Into her.
What?
And she looks great.
She looks great. She's dressed to the nines. I'm in like sweatpants. I'm in what I slept in. So yeah, I will be living in 2018 gear for the rest of my life.
Oh man.
Okay, that is what you need to know for Wednesday, April 7th.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.